Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. A warm welcome to each of you wherever you're joining us in the world. My name is Kate Oren. I'm Senior Gender Program Manager with the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. And on behalf of my team here, along with our partners, we are really grateful for your interest, your time, and for joining us for this session today. Before I continue, next slide, please. We would, as we like to do, take a moment to acknowledge and be mindful of the fact that this webinar will discuss issues of various expressions of gender-based violence, which can be uncomfortable, upsetting, and triggering for some. It is our intention to create a safe space here in this webinar, but please do take care. So again, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we dive into substance, we have some important virtual housekeeping matters to run through. First, please be aware that this session is being recorded and the recording will be available in 3 languages on our website. Microphones will be kept all in mute mode. This is just to minimize distractions, connectivity issues, but your active participation is warmly encouraged, please, via the chat box. Please share your comments, observations, and your questions as they occur to you using the control panel, probably on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be using these to factor into the moderated Q&A discussion in the second half of this session. You will find key resources in the handout section of the control panel on your screen. We'll have links later on our presentation here for your access. The PDFs are for easy access for downloading in the handout section. And if you have any issues at all, any connection issues or technical issues, please feel free to reach out to the great IUCN gender team behind the scenes here controlling the control panel. Jamie Wen, Laura Cooper Hall, Laura Sabater are all there for supporting you. Our session today involves presentations in both English and Spanish. Next slide, please. So we do have simultaneous translation in English, Spanish, and French, with big thanks to the translators on the line with us today. So to listen to the webinar in your preferred language, please go to Interactio, which you see on your screen here. You can go, it just takes a couple of minutes, go to your app store, an Apple Store or Google Play Store, and download Interactio. We're actually going to show you a demo in the next slide here. It literally takes a couple of seconds. When you open Interactio, you're going to have to enter the code that you see in blue on your screen here, GBV-ENV Center Web 3. When you download this, you're going to select the language of your choice. Then we recommend muting your screen here and listening so you're not listening to 2 voices at once. If you're set up to do so, we recommend downloading the app on your phone so you're able to listen through headphones and watch the presentation on your screen. And of course, again, if you have any technical issues, please chat to the team here. We're going to show a quick demo here. And that's it. You'll pick your language and you'll be able to hear the live translation. And we're all set. So today's session is part of our Gender-Based Violence and Environment Linkages webinar series, which aims to build awareness and strategies and community to better understand and address these linkages. As some of you may have joined our past sessions, you probably know that IUCN and USAID together have been investigating these interlinked issues and are prioritizing attention to tackle them through our partnership agent, Advancing Gender in the Environment. Agent aims to strengthen environment programming through gender-responsive strategies and results, and to leverage environment programming for gender equality outcomes. Agent hosts this webinar series to continuously learn and to promote learning amongst a wide range of cross-sector partners and practitioners from around the world to be able to gather strategies and spotlight promising practice. So today, this session, next slide please, is particularly special as in addition to the objectives I've mentioned, we are launching and celebrating the new winners of USAID's RISE Challenge, which is a global grants mechanism that's uniquely focused on supporting strategies to tackle gender-based violence in relation to natural resource access and control. So today, we have amazing speakers. We are going to hear from the 4 projects as they begin to work to address gender-based violence in different environment-related contexts and regions. Now, before we move to our speakers, we have a very quick poll for you. We would like to ask you if you would please share with us on a scale of 1 to 5, how you would rate your current knowledge on gender-based violence and environment linkages. From 1, not feeling very knowledgeable at all, to 5, feeling extremely knowledgeable and being a resource for others. So the poll is going to open up. We're going to take just 20 seconds or so you can fill your answer. And then Laura will show us our results. And we gather this information regularly in our webinars so that we can use it to inform future sessions, which will roll out through next year. Probably just a couple more seconds. If you've done the poll, you can make sure your translation is set up. I see the numbers coming in. It looks like around half feel somewhat knowledgeable. Okay, that's a good place to start. Great, thank you so much. Next slide, please. Okay, fantastic, thank you. So 51% somewhat knowledgeable and 26% knowledgeable and know where to find practical information. Fantastic. Next slide, thank you. So our agenda today is full of incredible speakers and experiences and expertise. In just a few minutes, I will have the great pleasure to hand the floor over to my friend Mrinalini Rai for some opening remarks. We will then focus on the RISE grant winners with representatives joining us from each of these 4 projects who will share insights on why they applied for the grant, what they're hoping to change, and how. To shed light on some of the very diverse and interlinked contexts for these projects, I'll share just some of the insights and trends from the evidence that we gathered as part of our research process that will, I think, ultimately show just how important and impactful these grantees' work is going to be, and ultimately how possible it is for environmental interventions, programming, policymaking practice to actually tackle these issues. Then, the wonderful Taroub Faramand from WIHER, who's among the first round of RISE grantees, will share some reflections and moderate a discussion, including based on the questions that you submit. Gentle reminder to please submit your comments and your questions as we go here in the control panel. At the end, I'll share some new IUCN tools on this topic, and then we'll hear some closing remarks from one of our amazing partners at USAID, Jamie Small. And here, let me also thank USAID specifically for making this webinar possible. Next slide, please. If you are just signing on now, and I see some of you are, let me just quickly remind you that today's presentations are in both English and Spanish, and we do have live translation in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French, thanks to the wonderful translators at Interactio. You will have to download Interactio on your phone, ideally, or on your screen via an app store. Enter this code on your screen, GBV ENV Center Web 3. Select your language, and you'll be good to go. If you missed the demo earlier, the team has put some more information in the chat box, so you should be able to set up in just a couple of minutes. Thanks. Next slide. So while some of you may still be getting your language set up, please do chat to the team if you need technical support. But let me turn to introduce our opening remarks. We actually marked the first day of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence with her when we presented our gender-based violence and environment linkages research to her webinar organized around the CBD, the Convention for Biological Diversity, and we are delighted to have her here with us today to mark the last day of the 16 Days of Activism campaign this year. Mrinalini Rai is the director of Women for Biodiversity and the coordinator of the CBD Women's Caucus, where she and experts and advocates from around the world ensure gender issues and women's priorities are included in the major global environmental decision-making process for a sustainable and equitable post-2020 era. She works on policy advocacy and research in addressing the intersectionality of human rights, gender, and natural resource governance, and she focuses on integrating gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment in the decisions and actions of the CBD. Mrinalini, thank you so much for being with us, and I hand the mic over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. I hope everybody can hear me. Great. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My apologies, I can't put the webcam on because of some technical issues, but I hope my message will be clear. So thank you, Kate, for the introductions, and I'm really happy to be here. So 2020, the year is to be celebrated as a super year for nature. And at the heart of it is the ongoing current global discussion on biodiversity conservation, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which spans from 2021 to 2030 with a 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature, which sets to implement broad-based actions to bring about a transformation in society's relationship with biodiversity, and to pursue that by 2050, the shared vision of living in harmony with nature is fulfilled. This global biodiversity framework is to be adopted at the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Party to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD COP15, next year in May 2021 in Kunming, China. 2020 has also been an important year as it marks the 70 years of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, 25 years of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and 10 years of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. 2020 has also been a year of coping with the pandemic COVID-19, bringing close to home that Mother Nature has some tricks up her sleeves. It is time to listen and to act now. This should be a wake-up call for all of us. This pandemic has changed the way we value, interact, and engage with nature and the whole of society. The impact has been more devastating for women and girls in all spheres of their lives. For example, we have seen women spending an additional disproportionate amount of time in employment and care work, while also disproportionately losing their jobs. Also, as IUCN has shared in their current COVID and GBV note, the pandemic has resulted in reports of increased tension contributing to new cases of gender-based violence, while simultaneously taking up healthcare resources, negatively impacting opportunities for support to survivors. Furthermore, there are limited or no mechanisms in place to systematically map, collect, and analyze women and girls' roles and activities regarding biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, including baseline and indicators rendering their contributions invisible. This also applies to the analysis of the extent to which the loss of biodiversity disproportionately burdens women and girls. As we come to the close of 2020, it is a reminder for all of us to reflect and to strengthen our commitments as individuals and as whole society to ensure that the intricate link between nature, people, and planet take into account addressing key drivers of biodiversity loss that have direct links between environmental pressure and gender-based violence, as the publication IUCN reflects. And like you mentioned, we also did a webinar on the same the 25th of November. So thank you so much. I think this publication is very much welcome and is very timely. Today, December 10th, is a significant day to have this time webinar to commemorate the International Human Rights Day and the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and to celebrate today the winners of the new round of the RISE Grant Challenge. In the process and planning of Recover and Build Back Better, we need to bend the curve of inequality and injustice, and it is fundamental that human rights are embedded in all elements of environment, and hope that this publication and all these rich experiences gathered can support strengthening recommendations into actions to ensure social, economic, and environmental justice of and for women and girls in biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. So thank you once again to IUCN, to you, your team, and USAID for this opportunity to be here and to share my thoughts. And once again, I would like to congratulate the RISE grant winners and wishing each one of you the very best. So thank you so much.
Tina, thank you so much. Those were brilliant remarks, and I want to thank you for the extraordinary work and leadership that you provide to make sure that these issues are integrated into environmental decision-making at all levels. Thank you sincerely for your time. I hope you can stay on the line with us in case anyone has questions for you, although I do know it's getting late for you in the evening. Now, as I mentioned, IUCN and USAID have done extensive research into the evidence around gender-based violence and environment linkages across sectors and spheres. And the RISE grantees are tackling a wide variety of interlinked issues across countries and contexts. Through our research, we found that gender-based violence is regularly used as a form of socioeconomic control to maintain or promote or exert unequal and gendered power dynamics relating to the access to, uses of, ownership of, benefits derived from, and ultimate control over natural resources. Environmental degradation and stressors of all kinds mixed with gendered power dynamics compound these risks and losses, not least because scarce and degraded resources put pressures on livelihoods and economic autonomy. Those with fewest rights or access to those rights or protection of those rights face situations of heightened vulnerability. Sometimes this means reinforcing women's financial dependency on men partners, creating a kind of cyclical gendered pattern of subjugation of women who are left out of natural resource decision-making, which further cements their marginalization to the detriment of environmental outcomes too. All these effects undermine the ability of women to engage in and lead, much less benefit from conservation. This is especially true, but not in limited form, for Indigenous women who have invaluable knowledge and traditional practices around sustainable agroforestry. In Guatemala, 2 organizations are working together to address gender-based violence challenges in order to increase women's participation in local forestry management and to improve the well-being of women and families. Join me in welcoming 2 representatives from RISE grantees UTSCHE and Trees, Water, and People to share what they're planning to do in Guatemala. Gemma Gifford, the Central American Program Director at Trees, Water, and People, has almost 10 years of experience as a scholar, environmentalist, and nonprofit practitioner, working in collaboration with Indigenous and underrepresented communities in the United States and Latin America. At Trees, Water, and People, she works closely with Indigenous and local organizations to co-develop programs around community-led stewardship and sustainable development, particularly in rural Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. And Soledad Hutzitz, a Maya Quechical woman from the Guatemalan High Plateau, has experience in project management and implementation with a focus on women, girls, and Indigenous communities. She's currently the technical director of Asociación UTSCHE and coordinator of the gender team. Gemma, I think I'm handing the floor to you first, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Pues muy buenos días, tardes y noches. Mi nombre es Gemma Gifford y estoy muy feliz de presentar junto con mi colega Soledad sobre nuestro proyecto TUNUN, combatir la violencia medioambiental contra las mujeres indígenas en Guatemala a través de empoderamiento en forestería comunitaria, agroecología y espacios colectivos de sanación. Siguiente, porfa. ¿Por qué aplicamos al RISE Challenge? Pues realmente aplicamos por muchas razones. En nuestro trabajo con USAID en Guatemala, hemos observado las formas en que las mujeres y las niñas han sido históricamente excluidas de la toma de decisiones sobre la tierra y el control sobre sus propias vidas. Y no es una cosa nueva para nosotros, en verdad. Trees, Water and People y USAID han trabajado juntos durante casi 10 años y el desafío RISE brindó la oportunidad de llevar nuestra asociación al siguiente nivel en nuestros esfuerzos para empoderar la protección de la tierra liderada por la comunidad. Y contamos con un equipo fuertísima, de mujeres multiculturales de Centroamérica y aquí en los Estados Unidos con experiencia en el tema. Entonces estamos listas para aprovechar este equipo tan fuerte. Ahora voy a pasar a mi compañera Soledad, quien va a compartir más sobre el proyecto. Gracias.
¿Qué tal? Buenos días, tardes y noches a todos. ¿Qué problema vimos y por qué lo queremos cambiar? Porque pues, la violencia contra las mujeres, hay una violencia contra la tierra que también es violencia contra las mujeres. Si tenemos un medio ambiente degradado, eso provoca mayores limitaciones para las mujeres en los diferentes territorios y especialmente perjudica a las mujeres indígenas porque hay menos acceso a trabajos, hay dificultad en acceso al agua, a la tierra, a la alimentación. La salud de las mujeres se deteriora por un medio ambiente contaminado, por varios residuos y por la falta de acceso a muchos de los servicios ambientales. La mayor desigualdad para las mujeres también es violencia social, es violencia económica, violencia física y violencia psicológica. Desde UCHE pues, hemos tratado de ir fortaleciendo capacidades en las mujeres para que ellas se vayan empoderando y vayan combatiendo la violencia desde sus comunidades. UCHE en este 2020 recibió el premio ecuatorial por su trayectoria en la defensa del medio ambiente. Siguiente, por favor. ¿Cuáles van a ser nuestros enfoques de trabajo o cómo vamos a realizar este proceso? Primero, pues vamos a tratar de conformar espacios libres de violencia a través de diálogos, capacitaciones, talleres, donde las mujeres puedan reconocer que existe una violencia ambiental contra ellos y contra sus territorios, contra sus cuerpos. Vamos a tratar de empezar a fortalecer todo el tema de empoderamiento económico a través de pequeñas iniciativas de negocio o pequeñas empresas donde las compañeras mujeres sean las protagonistas de estos emprendimientos. También vamos a trabajar fuertemente con el tema de seguridad y soberanía alimentaria, siempre desde un enfoque agroecológico, respetando los conocimientos ancestrales, las prácticas y el rol principal que ejercen las mujeres en el manejo de la tierra. También se van a fortalecer capacidades de las mujeres en la defensa de sus derechos y especialmente el rol que ellas juegan en la defensa de los recursos naturales. Continúa, Jimara, por favor.
A la siguiente, por favor. Ok, perfecto. Gracias, Soledad. Pues, ¿qué esperamos a lograr? Vamos a trabajar con con más de 400 mujeres de 23 comunidades indígenas, multiculturales, campesinos y campesinas. Y muchas de esas comunidades son desplazadas, de verdad, después de la guerra en Guatemala. Entonces están en el proceso de vivir en las nuevas tierras. Entonces es un contexto muy importante y diferente en Guatemala que tenemos. Entonces esperamos tener un cambio en la vida de las mujeres, aumentar el bienestar de las participantes del programa, ¿verdad? Estamos trabajando con varios procesos participativos para que las mujeres puedan practicar sus derechos y reflexiones como mujeres de USAID. Y esperamos cambiar la participación de las mujeres en el manejo local de medio ambiente, específicamente en el tema de forestería comunitaria y agroecología. Y lo más importante es, esperamos que las participantes obtienen habilidades para combatir la violencia dentro de sus vidas, en sus comunidades, pero también a nivel nacional. La siguiente, por favor. Entonces, muchísimas gracias. Thank you al equipo RAIS y todo que están trabajando en este tema muy fuerte. Estamos bien emocionados de empezar. Muchas gracias.
Thanks to you, Soledad and Gemara. That's wonderful. We really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I know that questions will come in for you. A reminder, participants, listeners, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to send them in through the chat box here using the questions or chat functions. So as Che has demonstrated, there are emerging promising practices that seek to address a wide range of gender-based violence expressions. In cases from Asia to North and South America, evidence has shown that gender-based violence is a barrier to women's full, effective participation in and leadership of conservation efforts. When gender-based violence is not taken into consideration, gender norms can lead, sometimes unintentionally, to exacerbating risk. Positive social norms change, guided by local expertise, has shown to be a powerful enabler, including, for example, through male engagement strategies and fostering women's collective agency. In one case, for example, we found the women experienced increased domestic violence over their growing role in ecosystem defense. They were able to successfully negotiate power relationships over time, as well as slow large-scale degradation efforts. In another case, a project integrated GBV programming when incidences of gender-based violence were in fact a barrier to women's forest conservation activities. Specific attention to working with men as partners and addressing healthy and positive masculinities can be an important lever for change. This is evident in work around the globe, from a responsible men's club in fishery communities in Vietnam to the global He for She campaign. In Peru, Conservation International and the organization PROMSEX, is working together to do exactly this. I'm so pleased to introduce Cecilia Gutierrez from Conservation International to share the next RISE winning project. Cecilia has more than 10 years of experience in the conservation and development sectors, working with NGOs, the private sector, and the government. She joined CI in 2014 as project coordinator, and now she's CI's monitoring and evaluation manager. Cecilia, thank you for being with us today, and the floor is now yours.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I'm Cecilia Gutierrez, and as CI, we are very happy to have the opportunity to implement this RISE project and to work with our partner PROMSEX, that is a Peruvian NGO that focuses on human rights, including gender-based violence. For us, it's a great opportunity to work with this amazing group of women, the ones that we saw in the previous picture. We have been working together with them for more than 7 years now, and we have been working together to empower them and to promote more sustainable income sources, like an ecotourism initiative, food security initiatives, and also the production of herbal teas, of medicinal plants to produce herbal teas. So this community, where this project take place, is located. It's the Champuyacu community. It is located in the northern part of the Peruvian Amazon. The region of San Martin, and the landscape where we have been working for more than 12 years now is the Alto Mayo landscape. So we applied to this right challenge because, as I mentioned, we have been working with them to increase their income sources, and this sadly puts them a higher risk of gender-based violence, because this also increases their independence. Also because there's a huge prevalence of GBV in the Awahun native communities in the area, because gender-based violence has been a very important barrier to achieve conservation goals. For example, women have to ask for the approval of their husbands to participate in capacity building or conservation activities, and they also have all the responsibility of the household and also of their children. So this doesn't give them a lot of time to participate, even they have a very important role in the conservation efforts. And also because it was a great opportunity for us to address gender-based violence with a specialized partner as PROMSEX. Next, please. The main environmental problem in the community is deforestation. This, of course, threats the biodiversity, but also threats the livelihoods of the Awahun people who depend from the forest, and especially women who depend from the forest. Regarding gender-based violence, main issues are sexual and physical assault, not only for women, but also for girls. Also the denial of access to resources, especially economic resources, the lack of opportunities for women, because most women have children at a very young age, reducing their opportunities, especially their educational opportunities. And also they suffer at the household level of psychological, physical, and emotional abuse. Next, please. Our approach will focus on main three things. The first one is to engage men in a positive masculinity discourse. We will be sure of including especially male leaders and the spouses of this group of women we have been working with. We will include male leaders because most of the times when gender-based violence issues arise in the community, male leaders are the ones who solve them. So we need to make sure that they be included in the process. Also to create a community support system in the community so women can share and talk about gender-based violence issues and have a safe space where to talk about this. And finally, to bring the government support services regarding GBV closer to the communities, because there is a huge gap between the support services and the community. First of all, because of language, most women do not speak Spanish, and also because there's a big cultural barrier between both of them. Next, please. And what we hope to achieve is, at the end of the project, we hope that local women understand their rights and start identifying risk of violence. Also that they care about their sexual and reproductive health. Also that we have an informal support system within the community. that male leaders and the spouses of these women start changing or transforming their attitudes towards GBV. And finally, and very important, is that our staff, our CI staff, the local indigenous community, the local indigenous federation, and our partners in the field start responding better when incident of GBV happens. I hope I didn't run too much, and if you have any question, I will be happy to answer them at the end. Thanks again.
Thanks to you, Cecilia. You raised so many important points here, including, I think, an important array, as the previous speakers did, of enabling conditions, enabling strategies that could help reach these goals. I also want to mention CI has a new tool, a new, very short, I think it's a 4-pager tool out, geared to conservation projects and practitioners in particular, to consider ways to identify and address gender-based violence. So I recommend that tool, and it'll be available on our website. So moving now to the next related topic. Around the world, from the Special Tiger Protection Force in India to the Akashinga unit in Zimbabwe and the Black Mambas in South Africa, all women wildlife protection units are key in wildlife conservation, particularly as they use effective nonviolent approaches. For example, the Black Mambas in South Africa has achieved a 76% reduction in rhino poaching since 2013 without using guns. The Akashinga, or the brave ones, have not had a single case of corruption within their unit and are bringing more documented benefits back to the community than their men counterparts. These women ranger units have also brought a change in perception in local communities' attitudes towards women's involvement in conservation. Now, despite the evidence supporting women's roles in effective wildlife conservation, women remain deeply underrepresented in many protected areas and conservation zones efforts. GBV can be used to reinforce discriminatory gender norms that prevent women from participating in conservation governance. For example, we've collected cases of women being physically abused by their partners if attending conservation meetings, or suffering psychological violence committed by men and women in the community that oppose women's involvement in these kinds of conservation efforts. Raising awareness and building the capacities of conservation staff on gender-based violence is key to strengthening women's participation in decision-making spheres and change gender norms around it, contributing to GBV reduction. Joyce Bataru is the Communication and Development Officer at Kenya Wildlife Conservations Association, an acting gender focal point. She has 11 years of experience in the field of community conservation, gender and youth development in Kenya. As gender focal point, she supports landscape-level conservancy associations to integrate gender, and in 2017 established the National Conservancies Women Forum to build the capacity of women in conservancies, particularly on governance and leadership. Please join me, and congratulations to you, Joyce. Joyce, I don't think we can hear you. Will you check your mic?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Welcome.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you so much. And thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you so much for this opportunity. As you've heard, my name is, can you hear me?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my name, as you've heard, is Joyce Mbataru. I work for the Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association, which is the national umbrella body representing Kenya's 167 community and private conservancies. We work closely with government and other conservation stakeholders in a shared effort to ensure conservancies thrive, benefiting both people and wildlife. In this project, we are happy to be collaborating with Fauna and Flora International, an international-based conservation organization based in the UK, CARE International in Kenya, an international development organization with offices in Kenya, and the Center for Rights, Education and Awareness, a Kenyan NGO focusing on gender and human rights. Next slide. Why we applied for the Rice Challenge is because conservancies, which are non-state conserved areas, have been growing for over 30 years now as a response to tackling various environmental challenges, including resource conflict, habitat loss, and fragmentation. They cover 11% of the country's landmass and host about 65% of Kenya's wildlife. However, they face major challenges related to governance and women's exclusion. The Conservancy governance structures entrench gender biases, ensuring decision-making and power remains vested in men. Women still are struggling to access, influence, and benefit from these conservancies. Therefore, our organization, as the national umbrella body representing these conservancies, we think this project provides a huge opportunity to engage with the gender-focused organizations to build our gender capacity and influence our member conservancies on gender and reduction of GBV in conservancies. But also, we are interested to be part of the gender conversation in the country and be able to influence policy discussions around gender. Next slide. Our experiences interacting with women in conservancies, like the ones pictured here, have shown that there are interlinkages between gender-based violence and environment. We have found out that social norms, practices, and beliefs that lead to women's marginalizations, such as low participation in conservancy decision-making, are both perpetuated by and contribute to GBV. And some of the challenges have been listed in that slide. Next slide. So the types of GBV focuses primarily through economic, institutional, and social exclusion. For example, we have learned conservancy decisions tend to favor older men through conservancy income and boys through bursaries. And sometimes interventions intended to promote women's economic empowerment can also unintentionally result in physical and psychological abuse. The women we have interacted with have reported physical violence, verbal abuse, humiliation, and intimidation by their husbands due to their involvement in such projects. In addition, the men we have interacted with have also been teased and verbally abused for supporting the women. And in the very few conservancies where we have seen women being included, we know that it has led to more equitable and effective conservation. Next slide. To address the issues above, KWCA will adapt elements of CARE International's social analysis and action methodology to build the capacity of KWCA and its members to address gender and gender-based violence. We chose this methodology because it focuses on staff transformation and raises awareness and confidence in discussing gender and power norms. We believe issues of gender and power norms are the missing part of the puzzle for conservation projects involved in gender work. Therefore, we think this methodology will be able to open our minds and be able to enter into a process of self-reflection so that we will be able to influence our members as well. CARE Kenya has successfully used this methodology among its programs covering various sectors. To our knowledge, we think this is the first time that this methodology is being adapted to a conservation context. Most of the key activities that we'll be focusing on will be on building the capacity of KWCA on gender and of course for its members. And then the SAA training will provide safe spaces for KWCA staff and other conservancy staff to identify and challenge harmful gender norms and to help conservancies promote safe, equitable, and inclusive decision-making. We shall also carry out a gender audit to inform other activities, such as updating our current gender strategy to address GBV, and work with member conservancies to develop and roll out a safeguarding policy. A gender and power analysis will also be carried out in one of the conservancies to inform our other initiatives and to also be able to roll out the SAA training within our landscape level conservancy association, which we have chosen to be the Taita Wildlife Conservancies Association, to also undergo staff transformation. Next slide. We plan to also have a forum of male conservancy leaders to encourage them to reflect on their own internal beliefs and values and to raise their awareness of GBV and how they can prevent GBV in their work. As we implement the project, we hope to develop SAA as a methodology for the prevention of GBV across all conservancies. Next slide. And finally, we hope that by the end of this project, KWCA's institutional capacity will be strengthened and will take up actions and initiatives that promote gender equality and prevent GBV across our membership. The staff and leadership of KWCA and that of Taita Taveta Wildlife Conservancies Association will have increased consciousness to reflect on their own biases, beliefs, and values, and will also be in a position to discuss sensitive issues related to norms. And finally, the learnings from the project will also be promoted in the field of community conservation and the conservancy movement. That's all for now. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Joyce. Fantastic presentation, and among so many important things you discussed, you really touched on one of the major findings we found in our research over and over and over again, which is the importance of cross-sector collaboration. For example, between a conservation organization and a community development organization such as CARE. Across regions, gender-based discrimination is among the factors influencing environmental work and workplaces, in many ways largely based on assumptions around the capabilities of women, for example, which ultimately affect diverse people's roles, opportunities, advancement, pay, and safety at work. In Nepal, for instance, evidence included in our research showed reports of men excluding women from leadership posts, claiming women were not tough enough to face the varied situations of fighting timber smugglers. Gender discrimination enhances norms around and permissibility for sexual harassment, exploitation, and abuse at the workplace, including across environment-related sectors. In cases submitted to us from a turtle preservation camp in Mexico, for example, women volunteers were sexually harassed by supervisors and then reluctant to report any abuse due to fear of retaliation. Institutional culture shifts enabled through GBV-specific policies and safeguards are urgent and prerequisite for safe and equitable workplaces. Fortunately, the number of environmental organizations paying attention to this is growing. RISE is investing in this critical area as well. Wild Act Vietnam will be working in the development of gender-based violence safeguards and policies and empowering women conservation professionals to address sexual harassment in Vietnamese conservation organizations. Now, let me introduce to you Dr. Trang Nguyen. Dr. Nguyen is a Vietnamese wildlife conservationist, environmental activist, and a writer. She is known for her conservation work tackling the illegal wildlife trade in Africa and Asia. In 2018, at the age of 28, Dr. Nguyen received an award from Future for Nature. She was also recognized as the Eco Warrior from Elle Style Awards, voted among 30 under 30 by Forbes Vietnam, and nominated for the Women of the Future Southeast Asia region for her contribution in global wildlife conservation. She was also included in the list of global most influential women by BBC Top 100 Women in 2019, and 30 under 30 Forbes Asia 2020. Dr. Nguyen, congratulations, and the mic is now yours.
Thanks, Kate. Hello, everyone. My name is Trang. I'm super excited to be here today to share with you about our amazing project. Next slide, please. I'm a Vietnamese wildlife conservation scientist and a founder of the grassroots conservation charity non-government organization YACT. Next slide, please. Our proposed project aims to address challenges of gender inequality, harassment, and unsafe working environments by encouraging NGOs and government agencies in Vietnam wildlife conservation sectors to have a gender-based violence and harassment policy in place, as gender inequality undermining conservation's ability to achieve key goals of biodiversity conservation. For example, one of our main programs, the National Capacity Building Programs in Vietnam, aim to providing courses to support Vietnamese people, especially female, regardless of their background, to be trained professionally and work as a wildlife conservationist. But one day, I got contacted by one of our female graduates. She was very confused and very afraid. She told me that she was sexually harassed by a senior forest ranger on her first field trip ever as a full-time officer, and she received no support whatsoever from her male line manager, who was there at the time and witnessed the whole event. She was told that it was feeling like she made a big deal out of nothing, and that is completely normal in conservation. She considered not to ever work in conservation again, or even giving up working, doing field work, or giving up working in this sector. That when I realized that we as an organization cannot encouraging people, especially women, to participate in wildlife conservation if the working environment is unsafe and unfair for them, let alone to build the national capacity. To identify and confirm the problems that women in conservation are facing, we conducted a literature reviews and also an online survey. A total of 114 participants completed the survey, with a majority were female, aged from 20 to 40. Half of the respondents were working in international NGOs with a bachelor degrees, and the finding was shocking. Next slide, please. 5 out of 6 participants admitted having experienced sexual harassment in workplace. The most common form of sexual harassment was verbal. However, almost 5% reported that they experienced attempted rape or rape. 3 out of every 8 participants who experienced sexual harassment chose not to report that they were harassed because they were afraid of victim blaming and they are afraid of damaging the organization's reputations. 2 out of 7 participants witnessed sexual harassment in their working environments, and 1 out of 10 people witnessed attempted rape or rape. The majority of sexual harassment happened during fieldwork, especially in parties that involve alcohol. Most of the harassers were colleagues with the same organizations who could be peer, junior, or seniors of the respondents, and also business partners who are not in the same organizations. Next, please. Our proposed project activities have been designed in consideration of these results and of the fact that they will directly contribute to the development of the safety guidelines. The online survey, the GBV preventions, workshop with conservation staff, and meeting with conservation leaders will be used in an evidence-based approach to inform the creation of our safety guidelines. We will work with the participations of organizations to developing the guidelines that they will be able to implement themselves based on their organization capacities. Once the guidelines are developed, we aim to work with the organization one-on-one to design their own specific policies. In addition, we propose to train a local gender focal point at each organizations and agencies. This is extremely important as they will receive and deal with the report harassment from colleagues or from the working partners in line with our safety policies in a professional way. This person will provide immediate support to staff and will direct them to external helpline hosted by gender organizations who already are our partners, for example, Care International Vietnam, if needed. In addition, real-time data collection by the gender focal points within every participating organizations will contribute to the evaluating process of our project. The focal point person will also be encouraged to join the Vietnamese Women in Conservation Network, which we aim to create it by beginning of next year to provide immediate support for women in conservation. Next slide, please. In the recent year, many government grant and large donors required to reduce gender inequalities and include women in management and implementation of the project. However, participant NGOs only stop at ensuring female staff are involved in the projects, or the local women are participated in some project activities. Our project aims to create a safer working environment to enable women to pursue conservation as a career and excel as a conservation leaders. Next slide, please. We believe that this is the only way to ensure that the root cause of this problem will be solved. And having women leading conservation projects is also more likely to result in female representative of the local community to ensure that any conservation intervention will be implemented that desire with input from females of the communities. Thank you for listening.
Dr. Nguyen, thank you. You are a marvel and an inspiration. Now, to share some reflections and to join me to take over moderating a discussion with you and a Q&A, I'd like to ask Taroub Farahman to take the floor. Taroub is an amazing gender expert, president and founder of Why Her, an organization that won and is currently implementing a RISE grant from the first round. And Taroub, thank you so much for being with us today, and I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Kate. It's such a pleasure and honor to be with you all here today. First, I want to congratulate the winners. It has been my absolute pleasure listening to you all and hearing your amazing ideas and thoughts about your upcoming programs. To kick off this discussion, I just want to share a few thoughts about the RISE activities that has been going on so far. I have to say it has been an absolute pleasure working with such a creative group of implementers, organizations from all over the world. And we have been able, through the RISE platform, to create a community, a powerful community, I have to say, that we share with each other our thoughts, ideas. We are so flexible in the way we do our activities. We share tools. For example, Cecilia mentioned, or Kate, you mentioned a tool that Cecilia and the organization has developed. We are looking forward to seeing those tools. We also have a tool called IDEAR that we shared with our colleagues. And I have to say, listening to you all confirmed again the similarities of the issues, even though the contexts are different in different countries, but the issues are so similar. We're dealing with gender-based violence, sexual violence, the decision-making power, women's participation, their voice, their agency, issues that are really affecting our core livelihood as women. And I really appreciate the support that you are providing now in your own countries. Excuse me. So I wanted to kick off the meeting or the session for questions and answers by, commenting on the last presentation. So thank you, Dr. Nguyen, for your work about sexual harassment in the workplace. I read an article a few weeks ago about sexual violence in the workplace in the palm industry in Sri Lanka and Indonesia. And it really hit me hard how we use products using palm oil, not knowing that women and men are subjected to violence, but especially women. And I wanted to thank you for your work and appreciate the RISE challenge for allowing this platform to present ideas as such. So my first question that came from the audience, people would like to know more about how you are dealing with the COVID-19 situation and how COVID-19 affected the communities that you're working with. Rinalini mentioned that this is the super year for nature, but also she mentioned the impact of COVID-19 on increasing gender-based violence. I would like to direct this question to Jumaira, please, if you can elaborate on how COVID-19 affected your communities, because your project is working with communities, so I'm gonna direct this question to you, please.
Thank you so much. I'm going to speak in English this time, but can speak to Soledad if she has anything to add. So right now, Central America is recovering from being hit by 2 hurricanes within the last 15 days. And so that was a crisis that was not needed on top of COVID-19. What we're seeing in Central America is the impact of COVID-19 more than anything has been economic. People are having a very difficult time accessing basic needs, food, water. People have lost their jobs. It's going to take a very, very long time to recover. When you put that on top of climate change impacts, like I said, hurricanes, wildfires, drought, continued agricultural plagues affecting the region, it's a lot at once. And the pandemic just revealed even the problems that were already there, but even more. And so the communities that we're working with in Guatemala are in the south and the east part of the country, are particularly at risk of COVID because of already being vulnerable, being displaced communities, and facing extreme droughts from the years before. So how we plan to tackle our program in the face of COVID-19 is really just understanding that social and environmental challenges cannot be separated, but we must work on them together, and really listening to communities. Community members know what they need best, and it's as simple as that. So it's a lot of listening and a lot of community-led recovery. As we say in Central America, only the people will help the people. And so a lot of it has been a community-led effort around humanitarian need and envisioning for a new future. I think there's a lot of sentiment around not returning to where we were, but envisioning a better future together. So that's how we're dealing with it right now. We're would love to keep in touch with everyone on solutions that we come across in the future, but it's definitely a very difficult time for the region. And but we have incredible partners that are ready and willing to respond, and this is not their first time in a crisis like this. And so people in Guatemala are extremely resilient, and looking forward to sharing more about that.
Thank you, Chimara. I really appreciate your thoughts. And we received a question, since I have you now, regarding the ministry. Which ministry or which department at the ministry in Guatemala you would be working with?
Oh, great question. At the moment, we are exploring who our government partners could potentially be. Right now, we're working at the municipality level in Escuintla, Chiquimula, Zacapa, Jalapa, the other places. And so at the moment, we are looking to partner with the Guatemalan Forestry Department, and as well as some of the folk contacts we have within the Ministry of Health. But at the moment, USAID has done a lot of work as a indigenous association, sort of outside of the Guatemalan government, and the closest agency that they work with, like I mentioned, is the forestry group, where they've actually been able to affect change in the favor of indigenous people who now have more rights and decision-making power over forests. So I hope that answered that question, and if not, I'm happy to pass it to Soledad.
Sure. Soledad, do you have any comments to add? It was a pleasure listening to you before, so do you have any comments?
Sí, quizás me gustaría agregar que pues las alianzas principales que pretendemos realizar con esta iniciativa van enfocados tanto a la al área de género del gobierno, especialmente con las direcciones municipales de la mujer, como también las defensorías indígenas que están en diferentes territorios de Guatemala. Entonces esto nos ayudaría a vincularnos y trabajar muy fuertemente y de cerca con estas entidades para que también el Estado o el gobierno tenga en cuenta las necesidades propias de las mujeres indígenas en las comunidades lejanas, que muchas veces pues están bastante centralizadas en las áreas urbanas y esto dificulta el acercamiento con las mujeres en las comunidades y también la barrera del idioma hace que también esto pues las comunidades se distancien más. Entonces también pretendemos ese acercamiento con las entidades de gobierno.
Thank you very much, Soledad. We really appreciate it. I just want to maybe invite one more presenter to discuss how this will be addressed during the COVID. Your implementation will be addressed during the COVID-19 challenge that we are all dealing with. I mean, we have came together as a community, the first group of winners, and Chelsea from the Catalyst Project and her team allowed us to come together and discuss how we are being flexible and how we are changing the way we do business, because we are used to implementing programs in a normal quote-unquote situation, and this is a more complex, it's a sensitive topic. Number one, it's a very challenging topic to implement and address. And then we have COVID-19 on top and other environmental factors. So we have a lot of lessons learned, the first group of implementers that we are happy to share with you. But I'm gonna now invite Cecilia to talk to us about how you, Cecilia, and your organization envision adjusting the implementation to address the challenges of COVID-19 restrictions, please.
Thanks. Well,
we cannot hear you, Cecilia. Please, can you turn your microphone on?
I have my microphone on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, definitely.
Okay, perfect. Well, COVID-19 have been a very big challenge, I think, for all of us. In Peru, it affected mostly on an economic way in the community where we are working. And just to mention that during the whole year, schools have been closed, so kids are at home. Decreasing, of course, the chances of women to work. They have to stay at home with kids because, as I mentioned, kids are entirely responsibility of women. And also, for example, in the Shampuyaku community, we have been maintaining communication with the women from that community, and almost all of them got sick from COVID because they are the ones in charge also of taking care of the sick people. So they got the virus, and those were very difficult times in that community. They couldn't even, and also because a lot of women have previous sickness before, so COVID-19 came and make it everything even worse. So after probably a couple of months of people being really sick and things being really bad at that community, and now women are better, and what we have been thinking is with a previous project, we have a small group of women that train and increase their capacities in using technologies, in how to use technology to capture a lot of their traditions and their customs by using technology, and they learn how to use cell phones and how to use to connect to internet and things like that. So we are thinking that with this group of women, we can start the project if that's the case. Now we have a little less restrictions than before, so we are starting going to the field, of course respecting all the government rules about COVID, but we are thinking that we can start with this small group of women that are more familiarized with technology, so all we can connect the rest of the women in case we have to develop training sessions and start the project in a virtual way. So that's the way we are thinking we will start implementing the project. And we are confident that we will, during the duration of the project, we will be in a more normal context, and we can implement more or less in a way we did it before, understanding that there is a very sensitive issue that we will all be preparing of dealing with it in a presential way.
Yes, thank you, Cecilia. I really appreciate what you just told us. There's a lot to learn from each other here. I would like to invite Dr. Nguyen to respond to one of the questions that we just received, is how much are the relevant authorities working towards a safer working environment for women? Can you please elaborate on this?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So the question is, how much, in your opinion, are the relevant authorities working towards a safer working environment for women in particular, but also, honestly, safer working environment for all? I understand that the focus is on women because they are highly subjected to sexual violence and all forms of violence, but if you can elaborate on this, I would appreciate it, please.
Thank you. The Vietnam's government recently have been taking much attention toward gender-based violence. The fact that there are several changes in our labor code to include and to enforce that all organizations and government agencies have to ensure that sexual harassment will not happen in the working environment. However, what happened, what's on paper, what on the law is one thing, and the enforcement of the laws is another story, especially in developing countries like Vietnam and some of the other countries in Southeast Asia. Taken for examples, when we was doing our online surveys, we surveyed NGOs, international NGOs, and also local NGOs, and try to ask how many of these organizations have a safeguarding policy, how many of them actually have a sexual harassment policy in place. And actually, all of the local organizations in Vietnam do not have any of this policy in place, whereas international organizations, they have a policies that created in the headquarter organizations. So, for example, they have policies in New York or policy in London. And what can be applied in an office in London or New York might not be able to apply in Vietnam context, especially when you are go out in the field working in the forest with the forest department. And that's why we are trying to bring everyone in together and accept that there is a problem. This problem is here, and how are we going to work together to change that problem and change the issues? And that also one of the reasons why we, one of our partners, we invited the Vietnam National Parks and Protected Area Associations, who is a government body, to collaborate with us and to ensure that in all of our activity, from the prevention workshops to the meeting with organizations, they will also be involved. The directors of the national park will be involved, and we will discuss together how are we going to address this. And actually, the fact that because of the Vietnamese government having the law written down in paper, that is on, even if it's on paper and it's not really enforced properly, it's still backing up whatever we are doing because it's there in the law, and you have to follow what it was written by the government. So yeah, I hope I answered the questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen. I'd like to just comment on what on your answer. I want to say that what's happening in Vietnam happens everywhere. We have all these policies that are not operationalized. That's number one. And even if they are operationalized, the reporting aspect is still a big issue. It's women do not report, or even men, in the case they are subjected to sexual violence or any form of violence, due to shame or unacceptance or to being stigmatized and so on. And for women, they might be subjected to additional violence if they report violence. So the do no harm aspect is critical, and many of the colleagues, including Kate, thank you so much for alluding to the unintended negative consequences. So when we implement the programs, our eye should be always on the unintended negative consequence. So thank you, Nguyen, or Dr. Nguyen, for your very elaborate answer. I wanted to now move on to Joyce from Kenya and ask you, Joyce, you in your presentation you mentioned you will be working on influencing the policy discussion, which is critical and important, and it also emphasized what Kate mentioned, the importance of cross-sectoral collaboration. So if you can please tell us a little bit more or elaborate on the role of men that you mentioned, that you are going to work with men to become more supportive of the activities that you will be implementing through this challenge, and more. If you can elaborate, please.
Okay, thank you. In addressing the policy discussion, KWCA as the national level community conservation organization, we have been influencing conservation or community-based conservation policies. But then we also have realized that the Conservancy as a structure also influences other development aspects. And of course, one of them being gender. The issue of access to and control of natural resources is a key issue in Kenya, given that only to one or less than 2% or 1% of the women own land in Kenya, and of course that heavily influences discussions around land issues. And so for us, we think us being involved in national policy level discussions on gender, we will be able to share the Conservancy the Conservancy experience and be able to see how women can be included in matters to do with land. And of course, when I talk about land, I'm talking about equitable benefit sharing to ensure that women are also included in matters to do with lease agreements, ensure that women are part of the parcel consent, and so that they're involved. And so for us, we also know that Kenya has so many gender-based policies that are just on paper, but when it comes to enforcement, of course, that lags behind. We have succession laws, that of course women who do not have knowledge on some of these policies, of course, will be left behind. And so for us, the key thing is to ensure that as we are implementing the project, that we are also sensitizing both men and women about these laws and their importance of each of the policies. On the role of women, as I mentioned earlier, Conservancy decision making is based on land ownership, and of course we know that the men are the biggest landowners in Kenya, and so we feel this would be an avenue for us to start the discussion with them, and through the SAA process, we want to use it as a process of just reflecting on some of their biases. So we want to take an approach that is more slow in terms of just sharing the information, but also try to see how we can we can start slowly. We are planning to do it in a way that they won't feel we are demonizing men, but we want them to also be part of this conversation. And so we have not done this before, and actually majority of our meetings male dominated, and for the reasons that I've shared before. And so we will rely on our partner CARE Kenya and the Center for Rights Education and Awareness to be able to facilitate these discussions because they have the experience of engaging with men and boys. And we can't wait to see how these conversations take shape. But from the discussions we've had with them before, they have a strategy on how they engage them so that the women also don't get a backlash, from discussing gender issues. Thank you. I hope I've answered your question.
You did. Thank you so much, Joyce. We look forward to learning from you and learning from each and every one of the new winners. And our collaboration will only amplify the work that we do. We're very excited. I want to thank the organizers of this session, and I want to mostly thank USAID for allowing this platform for us to get to know amazing leaders in this sector and for us to make a difference, hopefully, in the next few months. So thank you so much. And if you have other questions, you can put it in the chat and we will be happy to answer them via email. Kate, back to you.
Thank you, Tarub, and everybody. Thank you so much. How lucky we are at IUCN to be in a position to accompany all of these RISE-supported projects, to learn from them and continue to elevate learning from them as they proceed in their implementation. So stay tuned, audience, because we will be continuing this webinar series throughout the next years to follow these and other projects. I want to just quickly share a couple of updates from our side. Our publication that we launched earlier this year with support from USAID is now available in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and today we launched the French version. So the evidence that is gathered in this publication that spans all regions of the world now hopefully can be read by more regions of the world. And we're working with partners to consider ways to translate these resources into additional and local languages as well. We have, in effort to literally center attention around better understanding and addressing these interlinked issues, we have established what we hope is a new go-to place for information, resources, tools, and also technical support. We proudly launched this year the Gender-Based Violence and Environment Linkages Center, which is a website, next slide please, where you can go and find curated libraries. You can find infographics for download. You can register your own resources. Please upload resources that you might have that could suit this emerging, building community of practice around these issues. And you can actually request technical support as well. We have brand new tools that we've continued to launch throughout the year. I'd like to highlight, for example, the 2nd edition of our information note on gender-based violence and environment linkages during COVID-19. We just launched this last week, bringing together evidence around the COVID context and recommendations for environment practitioners, policymakers, programmers, and donors who could take into account some of these suggestions and issues. We have an IUCN issue brief, just a 2-pager in 3 languages, and we will have new tools continuously rolling out through next year, a safeguards tool coming early in 2021, followed by a policy brief for environment decision makers, for example. Next slide, please. Before I hand the floor to my colleague from USAID to offer a couple of thanks and closing remarks, and I also do want to pause and acknowledge and thank so much Chelsea Keyser from Catalyst, who is the RISE Grants Coordinator, who does incredible work to lift these grants off the ground and support the grantees as they go and support us as we aim to elevate learning from these projects. Thanks to you, Chelsea, for always being here with us in collaboration. A closing poll, please. I see 123 of you left on the line, so please do us this favor of helping us learn continuously through this process, we have 2 quick questions for you. Number 1, did you learn anything today? Please, if you would, rate how you would consider your knowledge on these linkages now on a scale of 1 to 10. 1, not at all knowledgeable, nobody should be checking this box. 2, 5, extremely knowledgeable and can now be a source for others. We're going to give you 10 or 20 seconds or so to fill this poll. I'm not sure if everyone can see these results coming in, but I sure can, and we've had a change. Now more in the 3, 4, 5 camp, which is exciting to see. Okay, 3 and 4, good, that's good. Thanks, everybody. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. That's a measurable change, I would say. We have a quick second question. That is the first question. Let's go to the second question, please. Do you feel the knowledge shared on this webinar is applicable to you? Can you apply anything you heard today to your own work when you close this screen, go back to your email, go back to your conversations? Do you feel you learned anything applicable to your work today? I did. So far, we are at 100% yes. That's a great way to start the day. Thank you. And a great way to end this rather crazy year. Okay, no, a few people say no. Fair enough. Thank you for your honest feedback. Hopefully you were in the expert camp already. Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate your participation there. So again, with tremendous gratitude to USAID, especially the GenDev team, for their investment in this issue, their thought leadership, their collaboration. We are sincerely grateful to you as our partners on this journey. I have a tremendous honor to hand the floor to my colleague Jamie Small at USAID to carry us out with a few closing remarks. Thank you so much, Jamie, and thanks to all of you.
Hi, Kate. Thanks so much. My name is Jamie Small, and I'm a gender-based violence advisor in the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Hub at USAID. On behalf of our whole team in Washington, I want to thank you for tuning in and for your commitment to ending gender-based violence. This collaboration between IUCN and USAID represents some of the most innovative work being done on gender-based violence. It truly, truly challenges us to situate gender-based violence within broader social and environmental context. As a sociologist, I know this broader framework is crucial to all of our violence prevention work around the world. And I also know that it is actually quite difficult to implement in practice. After all, it's one thing to recognize that interpersonal violence is influenced by and accelerated by the broader environmental context in so many ways, but it's quite another thing to figure out how to make these intellectual jumps from individuals to communities to environments. These interventions require a nimbleness of thought, enormous creativity, a sense of curiosity about how the world works, and how we might want the world to work differently, and most of all, good data. Right now, we need good data and a strong public commitment to gender equality more than ever, since we are in the middle of the global COVID-19 pandemic. You all probably already know this, but the early information that we're seeing coming out in relation to GBV is really quite terrible. And unfortunately, it's almost certain that the negative effects of the pandemic will reverberate for some time to come. It exacerbates already existing inequalities, and right now we know that extended quarantine and necessary public health measures have created a set of social conditions that increase the likelihood of GBV, especially intimate partner violence, child abuse, FGMC, child marriage, survival work, and sexual exploitation, abuse, and trafficking in persons. I could go on and on with much more pandemic data, but I think you probably all already know that, so we can save that for another day and another webinar. But suffice it to say, we are in a difficult time, but it's also an incredibly important time. Moments of crisis, even with their terrible, terrible losses, also offer us an opportunity to reflect, to take stock, and to renew. This is a time to redouble our efforts and to tackle the work ahead of us and to continue building these remarkable communities of practice. I know that I will be looking to our RISE cohorts, both the original grantees and our brand new grantees, to lead us forward. So kudos to our leadership at IUCN and USAID, and most of all, kudos to our fearless grantees who are on the front lines doing this amazing work. This is not easy work, it's not the easy pathway, but it is the right pathway. Every day you're imagining a different world, a better world, a more peaceful and sustainable world for our spirited youngsters to grow up in. So thank you. We appreciate all your work more than you may ever know. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it back over to our IUCN crew. Take care all.
Beautiful, Jamie. It is the right path. Thank you. We're lucky to be on it with you and all of you. To speakers, listeners, participants, thank you again for spending this time with us. I hope you will consider seeing our website. The link we will put on the screen next. We have a range of handouts and links in all of these sections of the control panel. We'll share the recording to this webinar in 3 languages. Please feel free to share it. Share your resources and tools with us. Share your questions with us. We'll get to as many of them as we can. We really appreciate your time and your interest and your commitment to tackle these issues. Have a great day, everyone. Take care, stay healthy, stay safe. Have a good night. Bye.